While retirement is generally seen as a time of relaxation and self-focus, God calls us to love, serve, and help others for a lifetime. He has been preparing us for this retirement season, literally our entire lives. In retirement, countless Christians enter a state of spiritual dormancy, not knowing how they are called to have an impact for God's kingdom. The Retirement Reformation seeks to encourage and empower the 50 million Christians approaching or in retirement to embrace the calling God has been preparing in them. When the world says it's time to stop, you can begin to have your greatest impact. Welcome to iRetire4Him, the mouthpiece of the Retirement Reformation, where our goal is to journey from retirement to reformation so you can say, I retire for Him.
Did you know that when you retire, your calling doesn't retire? Your calling is a lifetime calling, and if you're still around, God's not done with you yet. I know you're fully aware of what you've retired from, but what did you retire to? You've tuned into the iRetire4Him podcast, the voice and resource of the Retirement Reformation, an organization dedicated to you, the retiree, who loves Jesus and wants purpose for all your days, especially the ones ahead. Bruce Bruinswood joins us today. As the founder of the Retirement Reformation, he's here to encourage and walk with you through retirement. I'm your host, Jim Brangenberg. Check us out online, retirementreformation.org, and of course on Facebook, Retirement Reformation. You know, it's no joke when my retired friends say to me, growing old ain't for sissies. My mom says it too. Growing older has all kinds of challenges that come with it, but also a ton of possibilities. In the last 60 years, retirement has gone from a few years to almost an average of 30 years. Sometime during those 30 years of retirement, a common theme arises. It's called isolation. Isolation leads to many bad things, such as loneliness, addiction, divorce, bankruptcy, and suicide. We continue today our 5-part series dealing with the impacts of isolation in our quote-unquote gray years. Today we'll talk about isolation, which leads to addiction. Rest assured, we'll bring you the truth, and in that truth, the freedom to walk away from addiction and isolation. Bruce, when did addiction become a problem for seniors?
Addiction became a problem for seniors probably when they were in their teens. And it just simply continues on. Now, when we talk about addiction, Jim, we're talking about and for some of us, it's our DNA gives us a greater proclivity to be addicted to something. And the addictions we're talking about today spread across those gray addictions, but most of them started early and then have simply continued. The sad part is that as we have grown older, the need to be able to mask issues in our lives so that others can't see and so that we can deny have grown stronger.
So be specific for me, if you would. What kind of addiction are you talking about?
Well, I think there's a couple of them that I'd like to focus on, and there's many, many more that we can identify and isolate. But
no, we're trying to eliminate isolation. We're trying to eliminate. We don't want to isolate anymore.
That's right. And so what happens is that we become addicted, we become obsessed, we put all of our focus on something that typically masks something else. So when we're talking about addiction, I was recently talking about with a nonprofit Christian organization that deals with alcohol and drug addiction. And so on the alcohol side, I asked them, I said, of those seniors, say 60 and older, what percentage of that population has an alcohol problem? And the answer that they gave me was, well, something in the range of 30%. I went, wow. I said, but it's the people who either have to wake up in the morning in order to get going with that, or at the end of the day when they say it must be 5 o'clock somewhere, so let's have a drink. So that addiction is major, and all the issues that come from alcohol. But the one that has been more insidious, I think, since COVID, has been the fact that is the opioid addictions, and those have come through a whole variety of different ways. For younger people, they have been sucked into, here is a better way to get a high and to escape from your problems. For seniors, for many, it's been when they went into the hospital for whatever. and and fentanyl and opioids were given to them as a painkiller, and then an addictive personality latches onto that, and they continue to go. Let me just share a story. We had a man staying with us for a period of time, and he needed a lot of help. And it wasn't until he left that I realized actually how much help he got, because there was a package that showed up on our front porch, and it was brown paper wrapped, and I didn't know what it was, so I opened it up. Inside were from China. There were 100 fentanyl pills or opioids. And so I hadn't realized the degree to which he was totally dependent on those and the ability to reach out and get those. So as Christians, we want to deny that kind of stuff exists within the church and for our grandparents or for our parents, or and for our kids. And so what happens is that we mask our isolation and our loneliness with a covering of alcohol or drugs, which keeps us from thinking about the issues that are in front of us, whatever they may be.
So do you think it's driven by physical pain or mental pain?
Yes, is the answer to the question. And the physical pain is a reflection of the mental challenges that people are facing. And so when you're covering up your physical pain, at the same time, you're covering up your mental challenges. And so again, as we talked about before, it keeps us from experiencing the fruit of the Spirit and leaves us in a place of isolation, a place of loneliness, and a lack of connectivity with others.
But since so many seniors live in isolation, how can their family and friends find out if addiction's a problem? Because they're living in isolation. Like you said, you had somebody living with you. You didn't realize that their issues were that serious. You had somebody living with you. Okay, what about all those seniors that live alone or live with their spouse, but they're far away from kids or grandkids or whatever kind of relatives? How do you find out if addiction's a problem?
Good question, and it's not easy. But I think if you look for behavior modification, or you can determine the steps that they're going to take. So, for example, you go visit Grandpa, and at 5 o'clock he pours 3 fingers of bourbon, and he does it every time that you're there. Those are the clues. When you look at, and I kind of hate to say this. No, I don't hate to say it. I am going to say it. When you go in the bathroom, check the cabinet, see what bottles are there, see what pills are there, and you'll know the answer. Often it's a change in behavior that sometimes they're up and high, and sometimes they're lower and just terrible. So you look for those behavioral things. Now, there's another addiction that I want to bring into our conversation also, and it's the sexual addiction, and it's the addiction to pornography. I had another conversation with an organization, a Christian nonprofit that deals with those issues. They started out primarily dealing with them with, parents and their children. But as everything has evolved and the 30 years have evolved, I asked them, I said, are you seeing those kinds of issues showing up in seniors in 60 and older? They said, absolutely. And I said, give me some numbers. What do you think? They said, well, we believe that 10 years ago, it was around 10 to 15%. Now it's up to 25, and it's continuing to grow. And so, you don't think of grandma or grandpa because, that was the other thing they talked about. It's not just men, but it's men and women. And the availability of sexually explicit information available everywhere for us has made that as another escape, which leads to isolation, because when you are addicted, you're also, at some level, you don't want anybody else to know.
Yeah, it's a shame thing.
You want it to be private. And that's what leads to the isolation and the loneliness.
Right, the shame thing. Because
the shame thing.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
All right, when we come back in our third segment, Bruce, I really want to talk about, we all know about rehab and recovery programs for people with addictions, but is there one for seniors in mind? And I really want to talk about the hope for this. Where is the hope as we talk about isolation, which leads to addiction in our seniors. You're listening to iRetire4Him, the voice and resource of the Retirement Reformation. We invite you, check us out online. Eliminate the isolation in your life by joining one of our groups, retirementreformation.org. We'll be right back with an interview with Pastor Gary Gilmore.
Recreating Retirement is an interactive small group study helping you to move from nothing to what's next. You can join us on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. East Coast time on Facebook Live. Our goal for this study is to provide a group setting for interaction and new ideas while leading you through a first step in your journey from retirement to reformation. Here's the big idea. During the next 5 years, 5,000 small groups will experience this journey of discovery in churches and faith-based organizations across the country. Is your church a place where recreating retirement needs to be planted? Join us online to experience the study or prepare to lead a small group at your church or ministry. Email us at contactus@retirementreformation.org or go to our website at retirementreformation.org. That's retirementreformation.org.
Hey, welcome back to iRetire4Him. As we talk today, Bruce, we're talking about this whole gray isolation series, but we always jump in our second segment to bring in somebody that could just share the story of how they're living out their faith in their work. And today we are together bringing a new friend onto the show, Pastor Gary Gilmore from First Baptist Church in Marionville, Missouri, my new hometown, because Gary's got some stuff to offer in here. Bruce, I'm going to let you run with it from here.
Very good, Gary. Good to see you again. It's a pleasure to be with you and pray with you here just about a week ago in Marionville, Illinois, Marionville, Missouri.
Right.
So just give us a little quick executive summary. You've got a varied history. You're pastoring a small church now in a small town. You've got experience as a chaplain. Just kind of give us a little executive summary so our audience has a better sense of who you are.
Sure. Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to talk with you guys again and your larger team. I'm one of those guys that grew up in the local church and felt God's call to ministry as I went into college. And so I didn't have to go back. I kind of plowed through college and seminary in one fell swoop. Came out into a small rural congregation. It was a jolt. We joked that coming from the Dallas-Fort Worth area into a little town that had 900 people, and I think they counted the stray dogs on the census as well.
Probably the cats also.
Yeah, rolled up the sidewalks at 5 o'clock, So it was not only a culture change, but it was really a way to find out how other people did life and worked their faith. And so over a period of time, it was a crossroads of, do I get more education, or do I maybe look for an opportunity to use what I've received? Because in a small town with a Master of Divinity, I was ahead of the pack. So we looked around, and there was a National Guard chaplain slot open. And a lot of people can go join the Guard, but a chaplain is like a doctor, a lawyer, or a chaplain. Those three special staff officers, the doc needs a medical degree, the lawyer needs a law degree, and the chaplain needs a ministerial degree. And so with an endorsement from the denomination, it just opened up an opportunity to relate to my people in a very different way. And I saw very early that could create a larger platform for life and ministry. And what it really did for me in a small church setting was it made me go out into the larger world and took me out of my comfort zone pretty quick. But then I brought those skills and experiences back into the local church. And I felt that not only was I helping the Guard and the soldiers, but it was sure a blessing to our church as well. So wanted to stay growing. There's no small places. I just didn't want to be a small person. And then 9/11 happened. Every church had supported my ministry with chaplains and saw it as an expansion of their ministry, which it was. But then 9/11 really was the pivotal point, and my whole career was before 9/11 and after 9/11. And at that point, I was pastoring county seat town here in Lawrence County, loving it. Things were good. But I realized there were many other good people who could that church, but there were few guys already trained and in the military who could move into that larger growing area. So 10 years, the last 10 years, last 15 years was deployments. Susan kept the home fires burning, the girls. I got home just in time for high school graduation. I went from zero to hero because the plane was on time, kind of thing. And then it was full time, and we'll use that to segue into the topic here. The last 10 years was full time in our state headquarters as the senior Army chaplain for the Missouri National Guard. About 12 to 14,000 different soldiers and families spread out 114 counties across the state of Missouri. And we had soldiers and airmen in every one of those counties. And so we brought together the resources the Army was bringing for families, like marriage enrichment retreats or suicide awareness and prevention, or we did a lot of, we called them yellow ribbons, where, hey, I was that guy at the front helping a family say goodbye to their loved one for a year at a time. And then we were also doing that reintegration piece when a soldier came home and tried to reintegrate into his job, did he miss a promotion? Did the factory close? What had happened while he was gone? And then reconnect with the family. So we in the Guard side of the military, there's active duty and there's reserve, and that's just kind of a filler. But the National Guard is that third in between that works for our governors as well as our federal. So like when the Chaplain tornado came, boom, there we were, ice storms, floods, Missouri River outside of its banks. It was a very busy time. And if you didn't mobilize and go overseas, you got mobilized to clean up Joplin or to respond with an electrical generator to a community. So
Gary, let me ask you a question. One of the themes that I hear through the recitation of how God has prepared you for what's next, that in each one of those elements, there was an element of transition and change. Yes. You've also seen in your ministry with in the military and in the church, where families are dealing with transition and change, whether it be death or moving away. What are some of the key variables that you've experienced that you can share with our audience that will give them either insight or encouragement?
Okay. So every story is a little different, and yet there are commonalities, common experiences. We call it the deployment cycle, where you were kind of always ready, but hey, the orders came and now you go. Any preparation that the family would make financially, emotionally, we learned that if you had a strong family going into a deployment, the pressures of deployment would test you, but you would very likely be strong as you came home. And there were those who thought that, I don't need to be faithful in church, or I don't need to be quiet time in my own life or taking care of my own mental health. I just share a story of that. The last 10 years, Susan lived in our town and I had an apartment at the state headquarters. So I was a geographical bachelor. And I realized that I said, this is not a good thing if the state chaplain doesn't take care of himself. And so I connected with a local church, and that was good. In fact, we have a cute story. Susan would come visit me on drill weekend, and she would go to church in the morning while I was out at the headquarters. And then we would be together. We'd have dinner together. We'd walk in the park in the afternoon. And then she had to come home as a teacher to be home Monday morning. So we would say goodbye. She would drive home, and I would go to church on Sunday night. And one Sunday night, one of the nice ladies said, I noticed your wife was here this morning, and are you all getting along okay? Is things okay? No, they were, but I tell you what I needed to do is I needed to connect with a group of men. And it was, even though I'd been a pastor, to walk into another church and just barge into a group of guys, that first day I showed up at 6:30 in the morning for a prayer meeting. We would have prayer together and then go eat breakfast and then go to work. And boy, that first day it was hard, and I kind of got the look over. But they were the greatest bunch of guys, and it brought me friendship and fellowship and took care of me so that I could take care of others. They don't realize how much they impacted 12,000 other soldiers and airmen by just self-care. So that's our first one.
Well, and I'm gonna interrupt because we're out of time for this segment. But Gary, I'm asking if you'll hold over, because Bruce and I really want to get your perspective on the isolation things that you're seeing, because you're retired and you've been dealing with retired military, and you're seeing some of the same things that we're seeing. And I'd like to be able to get your perspective on the things that are impacting our seniors: isolation and loneliness and addiction and suicide and divorce and bankruptcy, those things. Can you hang on so we can record a second middle segment for our next podcast?
I'd be honored. Sorry I took the time.
That's okay. It's great to hear your story. Great to hear your story. You're listening to iRetire4Him. We'll be right back with segment 3, talking about isolation, which leads to addiction. And then stay tuned. Next podcast, Gary will finish the story and what he's seeing about isolation and its impacts on seniors. We'll be right back with more on iRetire4Him.
Our work on this earth doesn't end when the paycheck stops. God calls us to be faithful for a lifetime. Whether you're looking forward to retirement or you're already there, our all-small group study, Recreating Retirement, will help you understand, engage, and activate what God has for you in this fourth quarter of life. Join Retirement Reformation founder Bruce Bruinsma as you consider your past, strengths, spiritual gifts, and your passions, and how they all come together as the call God has for you in these years. Connect with us on our online community group at facebook.com/Retirement Reformation, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern, or if you'd like to bring Recreating Retirement to your church, email us at contactus@retirementreformation.org. Are you ready to start your life-changing journey today?
Hey, welcome back to iRetire4Him, as we're talking about really our 5-part series, How Isolation Leads to Addiction. And it was a great conversation getting started with Pastor Gary Gilmore, and I can't wait till next podcast we get to finish the rest of his story, Bruce. But let's jump back into this addiction conversation for seniors. It seems obvious to me that there's got to be a rehab program for seniors. But, we know about rehab and recovery programs like Celebrate Recovery for people that are younger with all different kinds of hurts, habits, and hang-ups, as Celebrate Recovery talks about. Have you ever run into one specifically for seniors dealing with addiction issues?
Jim, it's kind of interesting. And I think one of the challenges of our community and the Retirement Reformation is to expand the thinking of organizations in a whole variety of different categories, including this one for addiction. Matter of fact, the last 3 organizations that I sat down with and had a conversation to educate myself and to learn about and to see where they are, when I ask them the question, is there anything in your messaging or in your programmatic activities or in your group activities that are specifically geared for retirees? And typically what happens is that there is seems like a long, but probably about a 15-second silence. And they say, well, our program is for everybody. Let me tell you a story about everybody. When Judy and I were young marrieds and we were living in a turnaround 1-bedroom apartment, and it was Christmas time. And it was a 4-plex, and it was around 5:30, 6 o'clock. I went in to take a shower, and this group came up and they were caroling outside. And so I'm listening and getting all soaped up and everything and saying, well, that's really nice. And then they stopped and they came and I heard a knock on the door. And Judy went to answer the door, and I thought, oh my goodness, what's going to happen now? And she was very wise. She asked them, she said, well, what would we be donating to? Who is this for? And they answered, everybody. And I couldn't get out of the shower fast enough. She went to her purse, got some money, and gave it to them. And so it's always impacted me. It's kind of like when we talk about retirees, what are you going to do in retirement? And they come up with nothing. Well, everybody is about the same kind of an answer. And so these addiction organizations, whether we're talking about drugs, alcohol, sex, whatever it may be, they always say, well, our program is for everybody. And I finally started saying to them, no, it's not. Seniors have some different issues. Many of the causes are the same, but the way it plays out is not the same recovery process, or same recovery steps, same recovery process, better word,
right,
than others. And so we do know that recovery from addiction all starts with, first of all, realizing that you got a problem. It's like becoming a Christian. If you don't realize there's sin in your life, God's saving grace doesn't have much relevance. But once you recognize that, then that saving grace, well, same thing with addiction, that you have to realize that. But it gets covered up and machinated in so many different ways for seniors that the language is different. And frankly, I think we should all put on our prayer list for all these areas that, in fact, there will be specific programs that deal with these issues for seniors. So a short answer to your question, Jim, I don't know of any.
Wow. Short answer? Yeah, that was a short answer. Okay, but that's terrifying and staggering to understand it. But maybe somebody listening today, Bruce, will call in to you or reach out to you at retirementreformation.org and said, yes, but I had an addiction problem. I want to help start a program, because I would imagine that since Teen Challenge doesn't take just teens, it takes adults. Maybe Teen Challenge could be Teen Challenge for seniors too. You just never know. But I think there's a desperate need in the kingdom for that kind of stuff, because we're seeing this as such an issue. Bruce, do you think we need to take and address the issue of isolation before we address the issues, of addiction? I mean, can you solve an addiction problem without eliminating?
I don't think you can separate them. I think they are integrated, in that they need to be addressed at the same time. But I think the recovery from the addiction will, in fact, result in escaping from loneliness. And I think they are very much tied together. I spent 7 years of my life in an Al-Anon program. And so being able to experience all the different of the many people that came through that program in those 7 years, and seeing how they struggled, how they dealt with it, how they had isolation in their own lives because they were there because they had a son, a daughter, a wife, a husband who was an alcoholic or was addicted. And so how it would affect the rest of the family. And so there's all those integrated areas. And I'd love to have someone contact me and say, hey, you're wrong. There is a program and it's a great one. I'd love to know what it is. And if there isn't, to be able to say, good, let's figure out a way to put it together. Let's get all the best research we can and let's come together and see how we can have a retirement reformation recovery program for those that are in isolation and addicted. We do know that just simply getting us together in small groups for whatever reason is a step in that process, because it leads you outside of yourself and into a connectedness with Jesus as your friend and others as your brothers and sisters.
You know, you talked earlier on the first segment about ways that we, as maybe kids of seniors, being aware, obviously staying connected to the seniors in your life. When you go to the bathroom, check their medicine cabinet, make sure there's not a lot of drugs in there. Seniors tend to collect prescriptions they never finished. That I've observed myself. But to build, if you've got a senior in your life, and so I live in a town in Southwest Missouri that has a lot of seniors, and so just trying to connect with them and develop a relationship with them, because I'm the new guy in town, though that's very hard to do in a small town. But maybe in your neighborhood, listeners, you can connect with somebody who's a senior, because often seniors live not near their children. Having lived in Florida for 20 years, I was surrounded by people who were in that senior category, 55 plus, who were thousands of miles from their children. And there was a lot of loneliness. Bruce, how does Jesus fit into solving the problem of isolation, which leads to addiction?
At the end of that chapter, where Jesus said, you did not choose me, but I chose you, and I prepared you to bear much fruit. There's just a little phrase that is at the end of that, the very last bit It's almost like a parenthetical thought that he had that John reflects. And it says, and don't forget to love your neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
And I really believe that the starting to recovery is when we come to the realization that there is more outside of us that we can impact, that we can help, that we can come alongside with, that we can mentor, that we can just be a friend of, is such a critical piece. And what that really means is that we're reflecting what Jesus wants us to be and provides for us to be, and then gives us saving grace over the times we screw up, which is, only between you and me a whole bunch, but everybody else probably good. But
probably not often. Yeah.
But that saving grace, so that in fact we can take the next step into connecting with someone who needs us, and we can reflect Jesus to them.
I heard it said, and maybe you said it when we were together recently, but there's no solution to addiction without Jesus. There is no way to get rid of that addiction without Jesus. You need supernatural power to get rid of an addiction. Bruce, as we close out today's show, I really want to talk about resources Retirement Reformation has to eliminate or to deal with isolation, to begin to break down the walls of isolation. Do you have anything specific about addiction, or is it all just connectedness that helps lead people to recovery?
I think it's about connectedness that leads people to recovery. However, as we continue to mature as a ministry and in ways, I think we will become more adept at being able to describe some of the issues so people can self-identify and then take steps into recovery. I don't think Retirement Reformation will ever be a recovery program, but it would be my hope that we would connect with those who are. There's 48 million of us that are Christ followers that are firmly committed to nothing. I would suggest that nothing leads to isolation, and isolation leads to loneliness. And so as we can conquer nothing, we will take a step in connectedness to taking us to a new place in our relationship with Jesus, our relationships with others, and therefore the relationship with ourselves.
Good words. And as isolation leads to loneliness and addiction, we want to let you lead yourself to retirementreformation.org, where you can get connected and start building relationships that will help you overcome the isolation in your life. Retirementreformation.org, retirementreformation.org. And if you are dealing with an addiction, I can recommend no other program more highly than the Celebrate Recovery program. There is likely in your town near you a Celebrate Recovery program, and maybe it's not completely catered to seniors, but it's catered to those people who want to become healed from their hurts, habits, and hang-ups. Celebrate Recovery. Check it out online. Type it into your search mechanism and find a group local to you. Great conversation, Bruce. Really appreciate it. And thank you all for listening today. You've been listening to iRetire4Him, the voice and resource of the Retirement Reformation. We got founder Bruce Brynsma here today, and I'm your host, Jim Brangenberg. We're Christ followers, stretching our faith in our retirement so that we can say, wait, Bruce, I don't know. I'm trying to think about this closing outline. Can't we maybe say like I retire with him or something like that instead of I retire?
I think in terms of our messaging, I think particularly in the context of connectedness, that if we say together, and let's do that and ask our audience to show with us, I retire with him.
Thanks for listening to I Retire for Him with your hosts Jim and Martha Brangenberg and Retirement Reformation founder Bruce Brynsma. I Retire for Him is the mouthpiece of the Retirement Reformation. Most Christians tend to follow the world's pattern of rest and self-pampering during retirement. However, in your retirement, you can be focused on God's unique call to love, serve, and help others. This can be your best season of life if you take advantage of a life's worth of knowledge and experience and combine it with a greater freedom of time and money and invest it all in the generations both preceding and following you. The Retirement Reformation is encouraging Christians to find and follow God's call in all seasons and aspects of life, especially in retirement. Take time to sign the manifesto at retirementreformation.org and explore the wealth of resources available on our site. Join this movement of God and journey from retirement to reformation so you can say, I Retire for Him. Go to retirementreformation.org.